My name is Al Feeney, and I'm proud to serve as president of the New England Antique Racers, and I'd like to welcome you all. The honored guests would be our existing Hall of Fame members, the inductees of the class of 2000, the presenters, the members of NEAR, and all the loyal supporters of auto racing in our audience. This is our third annual induction ceremony, and decided to attend. I would like, I'm sure most of you in racing or in general television watching are very familiar with commentator Jackie Arute Jr. My name is Al Feeney, and I'm proud to serve as president of the New England Antique Racers, and I'd like to welcome you all. The honored guests would be our existing Hall of Fame members, the inductees of the class of 2000, the presenters, the members of NEAR, and all the loyal supporters of auto racing in our audience. This is our third annual induction ceremony, and we're very, very pleased that you decided to attend. I would like, I'm sure most of you in racing or in general television watching are very familiar with commentator Jackie Arute Jr. He's a broadcaster for ABC Radio and ESPN. He not only broadcasts auto racing such as the IRL events in Indianapolis, he also is very valuable in basketball and football coverage, college and high level. He was a very, very strong supporter of this when we first presented it back in 1997, and he wanted to be part of it, and he guided us and gave us a lot of recognition. He had planned to be a co-MC at today's event, but good for him, not so good for us, as he just took on another full-time job, and he's now working for ESPN Radio, and he let me know on Wednesday that he had to be, he had an assignment this weekend, so he is the host of ESPN Game Day today. So he's unable to be with us, and he did send me a little letter that he wanted me to offer my congratulations and his congratulations to the new class of inductees, and I'm just going to read what he had to say. This is now Jackie's words, because I could never say it this good. Far too often, the sports world neglect the legacy of past heroes. We are preoccupied with the present and neglect our past. The people that you honor today played a critical role in developing motorsports here in New England. They did it at a time when few outside of an inner circle of fans appreciated their accomplishments. To some degree, they labored in relative obscurity and without the rewards that are now commonplace. Yet, each contributed to the betterment of our sport, and each deserves the accolades that will come their way today. Induction into the Hall of Fame is not a popularity contest. Instead, it is a proclamation of excellence. Please convey my sincere appreciation and congratulations to this year's recipients. They left a rich legacy that today's participants will be hard-pressed to duplicate. Jackie Arute. But it is my distinct pleasure to now introduce the man who will be the MC, the sole MC of today's event, a man who has participated in all our events. Again, a very, very strong supporter of NEAR. His name is Mike Joy. Most of you in racing know him to be a local boy. He grew up tracks like Riverside and Stafford and et cetera, all the local tracks. All the racing drivers were his local heroes. Instead of working in the pits, and as most people did, or dream about becoming drivers, he dreamed about becoming behind the mic. And he's gone on, graduated from Emerson College, but he had a long stint of broadcasting on the Motor Racing Network, and also he is a regular auto sports commentator for CBS TV and TNN television. And I'll always know him, or always think of him, and always refer to him as the voice of the Daytona 500, Mike Joy.
Thanks, Al.
Did you have a check? You said you want to get a check?
Yeah, hang on.
Oh, okay.
The check will be here, Al. Hang on just a second.
He's got to pay to come.
We do have a check. Why don't we'll get that out of the way first. Dean Nardi was kind enough to leave a copy of Trackside magazine for everybody, and if you'll flip to the inside of the back cover, and there's Ronnie at either Daytona or Talladega. But if you look at the back cover, that's the design of our newest Sunoco Race Fuels T-shirts and sweatshirts that we've had on sale for the last couple of months and which will be available at Racerama, end of commercial. Because we really believe in this Hall of Fame and its goals and its accomplishments, what my partner John Holland and I did when we started doing these T-shirts a couple of years ago was we went to all of the drivers, the winning drivers and the winning car owners on the modified tour and said, instead of trying to divide up the royalties, what this year would be 20 different ways, 10 cars and 10 drivers, how about if we give the money to the Near Hall of Fame? And all the drivers and owners endorsed that. And so we want to thank all of them who are represented on that back cover for their contributions for this year, and the drivers and owners who won races on the modified tour last year using Sunoco race fuels. So to help further the goals of the Near Hall of Fame, my partner John Holland is the money man and has the check.
John, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. On behalf of New England Racing Fuel, we're proud to be part of this program, and I'm honored to present a check for $1,500 for the Hall of Fame.
Congratulations. Thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed. I speak on behalf of all the Near members, and thank you for your support.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You want to just hit on who's here?
We can do that. Okay. Let's first acknowledge the members of the Hall of Fame who are in attendance tonight. Would you hold your applause till I read the whole list, and I'd ask them all to stand to be recognized. Marvin Rifkin was here for dinner. I had an emergency at home and had to leave just a little bit ago, but I want to thank Marvin for being with us. From the class of '98, Ron Bouchard, Renee Charland, Bill Slater, and Bugsy Stevens. Stand up, guys, and accept a round of applause from your fans. Representative of the class of '99, Leo Cleary, Irene Vendetti, and Eddie West. I want to thank all of you for being with us, and thank the nominating committee and the Near committee members who put on this dinner and who administer the Hall of Fame and help promote this to the people who are new to our sport. When I was about 9 years old, my folks took me to Cooperstown. And I would see those plaques and those bronzes, and every day when you'd turn on a baseball game, you'd hear the stories of those players and officials and the other people involved in that sport and what they had done to set such high standards to make baseball the national pastime. And even though I'd never seen them play and only heard about them on the radio and through people who'd been there and read about them in print, I still held those athletes in high regard because they made the game what it is today. As Jackie said in his letter, auto racing has not really done a great job of venerating its heroes. We are so caught up with the present and what we hope will be our future that often the past is neglected. And that's why we are so grateful to Near for taking it upon themselves to have the enjoyable task of preserving the cars and preserving the legacies of the people who drove them and owned them and worked on them. And we owe these people a great debt of gratitude, because once the page is turned, the present becomes only our collective memory. And what we can do to pass that memory on ensures not only the rich fabric of the sport's past, but also its future. You can't go to Danbury anymore, except to shop. You can't go to Plainville anymore, except to buy lumber at Lowe's. Or go to Cherry Park, or Century Stadium, or Eastern States, or Candlelight Stadium, or any one of a long list of racetracks that used to exist in New England. Can't go to Riverside Park Speedway anymore, except Well, you just can't go there, all right? Westboro. There's a long list. I guess that's why this year that hit me awful hard, because I grew up at Riverside Park. I have so many great memories there, and a couple of sad ones, but largely that's where all of my thoughts about this sport and the people in it were formed. And as I said on that last night that we celebrated at that track before its final race, didn't matter that Bob Stefanik drove an oil truck during the week, or Billy Greco was a long-haul trucker, or who did what. The only thing that mattered on that Saturday night was when the lights came down in the stadium, was whether Bob Stefanik beat Billy Greco, or whether Buddy Krebs beat Ed Patno, or Giacomo Giacomo, or whoever else was racing that night. That was what mattered, because on that Saturday evening, or Friday night, or Sunday afternoon at your local track, that was the reality. That little 50-lap play was what we all lived for, and still do. Thank goodness. There was a long list of initial nominees, which was pared down to a group voted on by the Hall of Fame committee. And thus we have 10 people to add to the near Hall of Fame list this afternoon. Let's get to the task. I will first bring up a young fellow who cut his racing teeth at Plainville Stadium, much as I did at Riverside Park. Started writing for one of those great keepers of the flame, and there were many in that day. There was Lenny Sammons with Area Auto Racing, Norm Patrick with Gator. There was Jack Schwartz with Illustrated Speedway News, Chris Economaki, of course, and Val LeSueur. And you could always tell the pictures from Danbury and Illustrated Speedway News, because they'd be right in the front page and right on the top, and there'd be 4 cars stacked one on top of another. So we're sitting here having dinner tonight, and I hear this thud. Psh, what's the first big glass of water that got knocked down in the dinner? Right there at the Danbury table, right over here. I'm surprised there weren't 2 or 3 of them stacked one on top of each other. But LaJoy was the only driver at the table, so I guess you can't have more than a 1-car wreck if you're the only driver. But Bonesy cut his teeth at Plainville Stadium. He started writing an occasional piece for one of those weekly papers. Worked his way on up to where Dick Berggren thought his stuff was pretty good, put it in Stock Car Racing magazine, and now, gosh, he's probably more famous than all of us. There's probably nobody who better chronicles the emotion of the people in this sport in print than our good friend Bones Boursier.
Thanks, Mike. It's my lucky break to speak after Mike Joy. There have always been 2 things you never questioned when the subject was Dave Humphrey. One was his talent. You do not win the races he won. You do not beat the people Dave Humphrey beat in the course of a career that spanned more than 30 years without having a degree of talent which is best described as God-given. The second thing you never questioned about this man Humphrey was his bravery. He had some of his greatest years in a time when you couldn't find a single type of race car which was truly safe. The coupes were dangerous, the midgets were dangerous, the sprint cars were dangerous, and this man, Dave Humphrey, drove them all. Every weekend in those early days, he climbed into cars that a lot of today's toughest guys might be afraid to sit in. He drove jalopies in the days before fuel cells. He drove sprint cars and midgets in the days before roll cages. He drove and he won in a time when the only things that kept a driver safe were a skinny seatbelt, an open-face helmet, and a lot of good luck. Of course, even for the best drivers, luck had a way of running a little thin sometimes. In 1960, at a fairgrounds track in Bedford, Pennsylvania, a stuck throttle sent Humphrey's sprint car hurtling out of the ballpark and through the wall of a livestock barn. When the first people to the scene approached the wreckage, they saw the car upside down with Humphrey beneath it. A lot of very good drivers died that way in those terrible days, flipping unsafe cars out of unsafe racetracks. Many of those who managed to survive such wrecks were never the same behind the wheel, because there's never any telling how that kind of crash is going to affect a guy physically or mentally or both. Humphrey got banged up pretty good that afternoon at Bedford. His shoulder was a mess, and a month went by before he was ready to race again. But when he came back, all he did was have the best years of his career. So you do not dare question Humphrey's guts or Humphrey's ability. But when you look back at his life and times, there are some questions that do arise. Actually, it's always the same question, over and over again. And the question is, what if? Because as grand as Humphrey's record is, and it is a record punctuated by trophies and checkered flags, you cannot possibly daydream about his career without coming to that same conclusion every time. What if? Think about it. What if Dave Humphrey had decided to stay in stock cars? This is a man who won track championships in various stock car classes at Seekonk Speedway, at the old track in West Peabody, Massachusetts, and at the Norwood Arena. This is a man who won the first ever modified stock car championship at the Waterford Speed Bowl. This is a man who did magical things behind the wheel of a stock car, yet he squeezed all these things into half a career. Stock car racing, as it turned out, was merely Dave Humphrey's opening act. For that matter, you can turn the whole question around. What if Humphrey had bypassed stock cars altogether, starting his career in open-wheel cars rather than ending it there? He had quick success with URC, which was then one of the toughest sprint car organizations in the country. In midgets, he beat the best in both NEMA and ARDC, and if you're talking about midget racing in the East, that means he beat everybody. In NEMA alone, Dave Humphrey won 72 feature races and 6 championships, 5 of them in a row. This is a man who compiled a brilliant open-wheel record, and again, he did all that in what was essentially half a career. Midgets and sprint cars, you see, were the second act of this two-part play called the Dave Humphrey story. But maybe this is the biggest what-if question of all. What if, instead of showing up in the late 40s at places like Seekonk and the old Kingston Fairgrounds, Dave Humphrey had come along in the late 90s, young and brimming with all of that natural talent? What might have become of this versatile driver, this crossover genius who could climb out of a stock car and into a midget and steer them both into victory lane? We live in an era in which American automobile racing celebrates the young driver who can do it all. You show that kind of talent today, and right away the entire world is calling you the next Jeff Gordon, the next Tony Stewart. It was different in Humphrey's day. In fact, his versatility probably worked against him. For most of his career, stock car people and open-wheel people lived in different worlds. If you followed one type of racing, you followed it with all your heart, and you had little time for anything else. So there were midget fans who had no idea how good Humphrey was in a stock car, and there were stock car fans who all but lost track of the guy once he went off to drive midgets. Happily for us, history doesn't judge a race driver simply by the kind of car he drove. History is more interested in numbers, and damn few men in the long and shining heritage of New England auto racing can match numbers with Dave Humphrey. Every driver in this Hall of Fame, including those we induct today, traveled a glorious road to get here, but not many navigated a road as long and as winding as the one Dave Humphrey traveled down. Finally, Dave, that road has brought you home, because today and for all time, you reside among your peers in the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the great ones, Mr. Dave Humphrey. We've also got a letter I'll read quickly from one of Dave's relatives who everybody in this room also knows. Dear Dave, sorry I cannot join you and your family as you celebrate this momentous occasion. A muscle disease, 1,500 miles, and 80-degree temperatures are my only excuse. Al Feeney and members of his NEAR organization have done an outstanding job in keeping the Northeast auto racing fraternity at the forefront. They are to be commended along with your fellow inductees. Unfortunately, we have all lost track of the amount of races you won. However, I do recall an incident that occurred after your late wife Lila had just finished dusting and polishing the trophies that covered her living room wall, her window sills, her end tables, and her mantelpiece. When she was asked how many races Dave won, her answer was, too damn many. Well, Dave, young stars will emerge from the Northeast, records will be broken, and legends will continue to be honored. Perhaps one day on a TV quiz show, the question will be, name the very competitive, freckle-faced kid who was born and raised in Seekonk, Massachusetts, awarded a Purple Heart at age 18 for injuries received in World War II combat in southern France, and honorably discharged at war's end. After returning home to Seekonk, he decided to pursue a career in auto racing, influenced by the building of the new Seekonk Speedway only 2 miles from home. After a few years of trial and error and tons of persistence, checkered flags began to fly, followed by championships in stock cars, midgets, and sprint cars. A quiet, humble man, a good husband, a father of 4 children, and a proud grandfather of 4 very talented grandchildren, a machinist by trade, having worked for the same company for 27 years before retiring. And the answer to that quiz show question would be, what is a Dave Humphrey? Congratulations, Hump, and God bless your favorite brother-in-law, Wally Saliba.
Thanks, Bone. And thanks for not using that stuff that Earl Grant gave you. And I want to thank Wally for this plaque. I usually have him do the talking and I do the driving. But he's not here, so I guess I got to do the talking. I was looking at these plaques up here, and I was thinking, when I look at these plaques, what I see is all the race fans. They love and cheer their favorites, and they hate and boo his rivals. But if that rival gets hurt, they're the first ones to pray for him and send him cards and letters, and that's what race fans are. And in those plaques, I see the car owners, drivers, pitman, and the gals that are with them through the good times and bad. I see the track promoters, the track owners, and all the officials that make the races go so smooth. Scorers, the handicappers, and the starters. And I also see the announcers and the writers who make us out to be more than what we really are. And I see the beautiful, gorgeous trophy girls. And I often thought, geez, if I only could take them home with me, what a harem I could have. I'd be the envy of all the sheiks in the world. And in those plaques, I see all these people all my friends up in the Golden Speedway. The Eddies, the Freddies, the Hops, the Richies, the Anthonys, the Harrys, Texas, all that. And also I see, don't forget the guys that we're honoring today. Jocko, I can never pronounce his last name, but I always called him Giacomo Giacomo. What a driver he was. And all the car owners up there are trying to get him to drive their car. And then there's Mario Caruso, and a lot of people say, I thought he was an opera singer. But he was, he couldn't sing be worth a damn, but boy could he make a race car sing. When I take that plaque home, I'll hang it on a wall, and I'll look up, I'll lay on a couch, look up, and I'll see a million stories, a million tales, and also a million dreams. And probably there's one dream that'll come out of all those dreams, and that is the beautiful trophy girls and the harem I could have had. Thank you.
Let's stay right up here, right in front there.
Take your plaque, come over to the board, place it in the memoriam of all the rest. That'll be there for generations to come. This is yours to take home as a memory. This is what you brought from Wally. One of the programs, 1 to 10 is in here. Take one of these. Come on over here. Proud to hope you wear this with pride. It's a special near jacket indicating that you're a member of the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame. Hope you wear that with pride. First 10 numbers are, you just took one of them. It's like a raffle, a lot of fun.
And then if you'll see Slater before you go, he'll see if he can fix you up with a nice trophy girl to take home from the dinner. Isn't it just a little sad how politically correct racing's become? Can you imagine 2 weeks from today, somebody will win the Daytona 500 and he'll come jumping out of the car and go, how about them trophy girls? You know, it's just, these things just don't happen anymore. It's kind of sad. Dave brought up a little problem that I experienced in my first season at Riverside Park Speedway. I'd been a road race sports car fan before I came into stock car racing as the assistant announcer up there in 1970. And the Riverside 500 was coming up, and at that track that was always a great, just a great source of anticipation. What driver would team with who, and how would they time trial, and how would the pit stops go? It was a very unique once-a-year affair. And I was going down the list of past winners, and unlike today, where track announcers sit in glass-covered booths 2 or 3 stories above the grandstand, the announce booth at Riverside was, well, it was right here, and the fans were, well, they were right there, which was all out in the open and kind of neat. And I'd be going down the list of all the past winners, and I get to this Giacomo Maggiacomo. And from right below me, somebody shouted up, "Magiacomo!" So I leaned over and I went, "Thank you!" And from then on, I think I was the only person in the whole place who didn't know who Jocko was. But boy, everybody at Riverside Park did, and it tracks all up and down the East Coast. And again, like we talked about, all the people would come and tell me that he was the best of the best. And when you hear it from so many sources, you got to believe it. The fellow who will tell you so much more about him is another keeper of this flame. At the time Jocko raced, he was writing for the Hartford Times, went on to the New Haven paper, and then has served as a consultant and public relations advocate and drumbeater for speedways all around the area. And I'm sure as long as he can draw a breath, he'll be telling us how great stock car racing is and how you ought to get to the Waterford Speed Bowl on Saturday night and see for yourself. Pete Zanardi.
I'd like to remember back 3 years ago on a winter's day when this Hall of Fame started. I think there was, correct me here, Danny, I think there was 8 of us. And I'm looking out here now at this magnificent event. There were 8 people there. Believe me, we had a lot of trouble ordering a cup of coffee. So, Al, I think there's not enough accolades in the world to tell you how far this has come and what this has become from that snowy day. And I also want to tell you, I grew up, my name is Zanardi, and I have never had any trouble saying Magiacomo. You know, when everything is going right, a Hall of Fame is really honors people who have honored their particular pursuit. Hall of Fame membership should tell a story, in effect read like the official history of the game. Being a Hall of Famer should not be an easy thing. And today, we're here to honor someone that's in Dave's Golden Speedway, Chauncey Jocko Magiacomo. I think you can make a hero that Jocko was probably New England's first true stock car racing hero. I don't think there's any doubt that Jocko belongs in this group. Yeah, he was a Riverside Park guy, no question about it, but those of us who frequented Waterford in the 50s, tell you what, we knew who he was. And I suspect out there I can go to somebody and people who frequented Plainville or Cherry Park, I bet you they knew who he was too. Everywhere on what back then was Harvey Tattersall's United Racing Club, everybody knew who he was. He won a Grand American race at Waterford in 1957, and my brother and I were there, and I can still remember the excitement. I mean, those races were bang, crash type deals, and the Grand Americans, big cars, short tracks. But Jocko was very good at that kind of stuff. He was tempered by motorcycle racing and midgets and by lots of combat in World War II. The man was a short track racer, and boy, you don't get any higher than that in this guy's value judgment. You know, he came to Riverside in the 50s with car owner Gordon Ross, which made an interesting combination, they tell me. Gordon was just as tough as Jocko was. And he raced into the mid-1960s. That toughness never wavered. But it was more than toughness that brought the race, or this sport, to what we sit here and enjoy today. He was also one of New England's first media darlings. I'm here to tell you, not an easy guy to talk to. He was not necessarily a media guy's favorite interview, but he was a guy that you had to write about. And he won lots of races in lots of places, and he drove for great guys, great equipment, for Gordon Ross, for Bobby Oliver, and for the Garudis. And if you look back at who he won against, you realize Jocko was an intricate part of New England stock car racing's infancy and its adolescence. Now, I suspect we have a lot of parents out there tonight or today, and those are two pretty tough periods to go through. In the beginning, he battled the likes of Ted Tappett, Al Keller, Dick Egan, Jim Reed, George Landry, Chuck Arnold, Sparky Belmont. Many, like Jocko himself, guys coming from the midget ranks, from the open cockpit ranks. And when he got out after winning the 500 in 1965, that Riverside field included guys like Charlie Brayton and Bobby Bard and Ed Patnode and Jerry Humiston. And isn't it absolutely wonderful, absolutely right, that he goes in today with one of his greatest competitors over almost his entire career, Buddy Krebs. And in between that, you're going to find near Hall of Famers that he raced against, like Gene Burgeon, Eddie Flemke, Rennie Charland, Red Foot, Bill Slater, and his 1965 Riverside 500 teammate, Billy Greco. It's more than fitting that he joins those guys here today. It's more than fitting because he had a great deal to do with the careers of all of them. I am extremely proud as someone who has a little interest in the history of this sport, to be part of Jocko's going in today, and I gotta believe he's smiling down at us. Jim Rosenblum, who can tell you about Jocko's career after he got out of a race, after he stopped driving, after he was a crew chief on Jim's Winston Cup team, with Jocko Jr. driving, is going to accept his award tonight. Jim, if you come on up.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to be here representing Jocko Jr. Unfortunately, his mother's in the hospital. But Jocko, I wasn't around that much when he drove, but he was a great crew chief and a very good innovator. His driving record stands for itself. I mean, if you go on the internet, you'll see he holds the world's record for speed with a Holman Moody Falcon. But as far as a crew chief, he was quite innovative. He developed the first tire computer in the Daytona 500, 83, with Buddy Parrott and Joe Ruttman. He had the first flow bench with Richard Petty, and we also had a brake system at Watkins Glen, which didn't quite make it through inspection, and that's how we hit Dick Beattie's top 10, which is now in the Hall of Fame. And we had a few other things like freezing the water jacks and screw jacks. He was also a very tough guy. He was at Sebring when Salvador Sinisi, Alfa's #1 driver, got in a wreck, caught on fire. He went into the car and pulled him out. And President Johnson and the president of Italy gave him plaques and a few other things. But he was a tough guy, and he was fair, and he was a great racer. And speaking of tough, I'd like to congratulate somebody else here, Don LaJoy, who is a good old-time racer. And I got one story. We were in Pocono, and his son Randy was driving for us. And it's a typical Pocono weather, about 200 degrees and 100% humidity. And Randy comes into the pits, and he says, I need water, I need water. And Don said, well, you, bleep, bleep, you run faster, you'll get water. Go on back out. So he came around. By the time he was 11th, Don gave him some water. So I congratulate Don, and I thank everybody for inducting Jocko into this Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Pete, lead him up and have him place the mic.
Lead him up. Okay. You all done?
I want to say one other thing. Sure, Jim. One other thing. Don, I want to see you the same place this year as last year, Victory Circle.
Jim, I'd like to have you take this plaque back to the Jocko family. In our honor. Choose one of these programs. You're going to get numbers 1 to 10 being selected. Over here, would be good to come up to the little t-shirt.
Our next speaker is a man who needs no introduction to this crowd. He grew up in this sport too, and right in this area, from his home in Manchester, Connecticut. On your table is a flyer for a new magazine, Dick Berggren's Speedway Illustrated. And if you will put your name and address on the form and leave it on the table, we'll make sure you get a copy of one of the very first issues, probably even the very first one, or the second one, because there's going to be a lot of them. And all of us have high hopes for this new project that I think will easily surpass the current Stock Car Racing magazine, and hope it will find a place on your bookshelf or wherever you do most of your reading, on the way to the racetrack, whatever. You'll see him in 2 weeks, probably interviewing the winning crew chief of the Daytona 500, which is a long way from Manchester, Connecticut. He is one of the originators of the Spring Sizzler. He was for decades the editor of Stock Car Racing magazine, and now launches his brand new startup magazine, Speedway Illustrated, in April, and one of, if not my very best friends, Dick Berggren.
Thanks, Mike. 49 years ago in 1951, Buddy Krebs drove in his very first ever stock car race. It was a show at Cherry Park Speedway. In 1974, he drove in his final race. In the 33 years of active competition in between, he won the most prestigious stock car races in this part of the country. He also drove sprint cars, super modifieds, and cars that were pretty much the counterpart to today's Winston Cup. More importantly, I think, however, than the wins he had was the way he went about his racing, because Buddy Krebs did it with style, and he did it with class, at a time when racers had reputations as bad as the worst and most evil Dennis Rodman athletes of any time in this country's history. But Buddy Krebs' ready smile, his affection for people, combined with the courage to come back from life-threatening injury to drive and win again. Buddy Krebs was one of the good guys. During Buddy Krebs' time, the top event here in New England was the 500 at Riverside Park. Team cars, one driver in his car went out and ran about as long as the car was still fast, or he was about to run out of gas, and then that driver bring his car in and tap the back bumper of his teammate. Off the teammate would go. 500 laps around that tiny fifth-mile racetrack. And all season long, Tom Gallen, the announcer, would tout who is going to team with who, because the big question was who's going to team up with the biggest drivers at Riverside Park, because the team was what won the 500. And in 1952, Buddy Krebs was a rookie. And who did he want to team with? He wanted to team with the same guy everybody else wanted to team with, the guy who was the best driver, the guy who had the fastest car, and that was Giacomo Giacomo. And in 1952, much to Krebs' surprise, Giaco agreed to team with him in the 500, showing the youngster uncommon respect. And together they won that 1952 Riverside 500. Buddy Krebs won it again in 1953, this time teamed with Benny Germano. In 54, he won teamed with Ed Flemke. In 60, teamed with Gene Bergen. In 63, teamed with Ed Patnode. In 67, teamed with Jerry Humiston. And then there was 68, when he sort of won it with Billy Greco, and would have if the gas tank in Greco's car wasn't just about a half a gallon too big. There were other races. Over 200 feature wins are reported in the 15 scrapbooks his wife Sybil has kept over all of these years. Wins at Stafford, Thompson, Westboro, Plainville, Millers Falls, Keene, West Haven, Eastern States. He about owned the Eastern States races. Bridgeport, Cherry Park, Arlington, New York, Lebanon Valley, New York, Middletown, Morristown, and some other dusty dirt tracks and dangerous asphalt ovals in between. He was a Stafford champion, he was a Thompson champion, and 3 times a champion at Riverside Park Speedway. Now, there's some great stories to be told about Buddy Krebs, and I was fortunate to have been there to have seen at least some of them unfold. At some point in the 1950s, Thompson Speedway ran sprint cars against the stock cars, and at the time Buddy Krebs owned a sprint car that he built himself, the Crown 7, and oh, how Gene Bergen wanted to drive that car. And so, against good judgment, against all odds, Buddy Krebs let Gene Bergen drive his Crown 7 while Buddy started up in the front of the field in a stock car. You see, fair is fair, so they started the stock cars up front. And they dropped the green flag on the race, and off they went, and Buddy Krebs is leading the race, but in the final laps, he could smell somebody on his back bumper, and he knew damn well who it was and what car Gene Bergen was in at the time. And try as he might, Buddy Krebs couldn't keep Gene Bergen behind him, and in the final laps, as Bergen went by, one hand on the wheel, Gene Bergen waved bye-bye. That is probably the most infuriated Buddy Krebs has ever been in his entire racing career. Besides the win and the funds, Buddy Krebs authored some truly memorable and spectacular crashes, one of which occurred on the sands at Daytona Beach, Florida, in Mal Barlow's Red Ram Dodge. Over and over and over he went, and some photographer somewhere got black and whites that appeared in just about every newspaper in the country and a lot of magazines as well. And Buddy Krebs looked at the car owner and said, "Geez, Mal, I'm sorry I destroyed your car." And Barlow said, "Don't worry about it, we'll get another." Little did they know that a few days later, a brand new Red Ram Dodge showed up in Barlow's lot, provided by Chrysler Corporation, who was so pleased to have seen the publicity, any publicity is good, that they showed up with a brand new Red Ram. And then there was the night at Riverside Park, where I was in the grandstands for this one, with the Red Ram Dodge, and the crash ended. And here's Buddy Krebs' car, absolutely vertically hanging from the backstretch chain link fence. And he didn't get out of the car. And the reason he didn't get out of the car was it was just barely hanging up there. And Krebs was afraid to move in the car for fear if he did in any direction, the car was going to topple over. And I remember everybody standing around watching, trying to figure out how to do it. And finally they did prop the car up, and Buddy Krebs jumped out of the car. And of course the grandstands erupted, as they always did. Anytime they could see Buddy Krebs, everybody applauded. And there was a wild one night at Menands, New York, where in Skip Madsek's Crown 7 stock car, the throttle stuck and he went off the backstretch, end over end, side over side. What a mess. There was virtually nothing left of that race car when the accident happened. And Krebs crawled from the car, and they brought him to the local hospital where they laid him out. His leg had internal bleeding and he wasn't in very good shape at all. And the doctor came in and took a look at him and said, "Fellow, what happened to you?" And he said, "I'm a race car driver and I just got into a crash." Doctor said, "One of those, huh?" turned, walked, and left the emergency room. Buddy said, I know where I wasn't wanted, persuaded his crew to lift him up. They put him in the back of a station wagon, took him to Connecticut, where they could find a more friendly doctor to take care of his injuries. The worst one, the one that almost ended not only his career but his life, happened in Langhorne, Pennsylvania in October 1960 in the Race of Champions. That was a time before door bars, and somehow or another Buddy got turned in one of those big crashes and somebody nailed him solid in the door right on the driver's side. He was hit so hard that the crash tore all the ligaments out of his heart, broke all of his ribs on the left side, and he nearly lost his life. 1960 was the year I graduated from high school, and at the time I was a huge Buddy Krebs fan, and I could remember seeing the television pictures a month or so later, and here's Buddy Krebs with a cane, and oh, he was beat up, and he was telling the announcer that he would be back, he'd race again, and I thought to myself, no way a guy that's hurt as bad as that could ever come back and race again. But I underestimated how tough and how brave Buddy Krebs was, because when the first green flag dropped in 1961, Buddy Krebs was behind the wheel of a race car again. And indeed, some of his best moments in auto racing happened after that crash. He was tougher than I thought, tougher than his competitors thought too. Today, Buddy Krebs works part-time, hustling cars, and just like always, he's still driving his wife, Sybil, nuts. If you ask him, he'll tell you that 33 years of racing brought him a lot of memories. If you ask his fans, and I'm one, we could all tell you about memories of Buddy Krebs driving Jimmy Jorgensen's VOs, or the Suffield Auto Center number 5, or the Crown 7, or Bobby Oliver's 10 pins, and doing it with such style and such class. Gosh, he was fun to cheer for. In his day, Buddy Krebs was the man of the hour. He's a hero who gave stock car racing all but his very life. Buddy Krebs, you belong in this Hall of Fame. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Dick. That was really good, thank you. He said it just like I wrote it. Dick and I have been friends an awful long time. I'm going to tell you, I want to thank each and every one of you folks today. I said I wasn't going to do this, so here I am up here doing it. But I just want to say that my wife, Sybil, has been my strength all the way through my racing career. And I love you very much. Thank you. My daughter's here, Robbie, and my grandson and my granddaughter, and all my friends here, the people I drove race cars for throughout the year, Dexter and Jimmy and Neil, all the guys here. Thanks for coming down, guys. Years ago, in my heyday, excuse me, in my heyday, we were invited up to Channel 22. They wanted to interview me as one of the race drivers. And I brought Sybil and my daughter Robin up. Robin was a little girl around 8 years old. They took us into the station and they interviewed me, asked me the questions about racing. I gave them the answers, and then they interviewed my wife. She gave them the answers, and then they looked down at my daughter. She was about, just like I said, around 8 years old. He said, Robin, we know who your favorite race driver is, right? She said, yeah. So he walks over and says, who was your favorite race driver? She looked at him and says, Billy Greco. So I'm looking at what the hell's going on here, you know? Looking at my wife, and then I said, what is this? She said, my dad's a good driver too, though. You know? I said, oh, excuse me. I said, oh, Robbie's. That was a long walk home from Springfield to Connecticut, wasn't it? A long walk. So we had a lot of good years in racing, and I'll tell you, they asked me, did anything happen that I could remember? And I thought, geez, I'm running Riverside Park at 5th and Mile track. You go 25 laps, everything is exciting down there, believe me. To get up to the front, you had to more or less bull your way through. And I think everybody here that was at Riverside knows what I'm talking about. And they said, well, what really happened that excited you the most? And I'll tell you a quick story. I was oh God, years and years ago. The late and great Eddie Patno and I were always friends off the track. We had bumpers and we nudged each other, so on and so forth, like everybody did. One night we had a 100-lap race. I was fortunate enough to take over the lead. Thanks to this guy down here, our handicapper, he always started so far back you couldn't even see the front cars. But I was lucky enough to take over the lead. For some reason, Ed Patno, he was a giant of a man. I think you guys know that, who knew Eddie. And he wasn't running good or not handling good, one or the other or both, but I was catching him to put a lap on him. And I seen him, and I pulled alongside him to put a lap on him, and that man would not let me through. I tried and tried as I may. Finally, with about 5 or 6 laps to go, he put me into the cinders. Instead of winning the race, I came in 4th. And I was furious. My temperature gauge was not on my car, on me, was over to the end. I parked that race car in the pit. He was down the other end of it. I ran over to him. I was like, I'm big now. I was like 150 pounds. Eddie was a giant. I ran up to that car and I smacked him hard as my body would let me. And he fell like a rock. Leo Matty, I don't know how many people remember Leo. He's standing there, he's got a cigar in his mouth, and he put his arm around me. He said, buddy, listen to me. He said, if I were you, I would turn around and run back to my race car as fast as my legs will carry me. He says, because when he gets up, he's going to kill you. I looked at Leo Matty, I looked down at Eddie Patno, and I turned around and I ran back to my race car, fast as my legs would carry me. And my guys were waiting there. They had all the usual Riverside wrenches, the pipe wrenches, and the lug wrenches, so on and so forth. And I figured, he is going to kill me. He is. And we waited for him to come, and he never came over. Not once. Now I'm figuring all that week, every time I crossed the street, I'd look both ways. And I'm serious. You know, the guy's going to get me. He's very patient, but he's going to get me. And we had 3 more races left, and we made contact. And one time I was on the outside of him, I got him in traffic, and I was between the 3rd and 4th turn at Riverside, and I thought then, he's going to put me up into the top bleacher of that roller coaster. I know I'm going to raise it, but he never did. During that winter time, I was at Southern Auction Sales right down the road here. For you folks that don't know, that's where dealers buy and sell used cars. And I'm standing there, and I got my arms crossed. I'm looking at some cars to buy, and this guy comes and get a tap like that, and I turned around. There he was. I said, oh, God, please. He says, you still mad at me, Krebs? And I said, no, I'm not. He said, I'm not mad at you. He said, put it there. And he put his hand out, and I put my hand out. And we shook hands. And he put his arms around me and embraced me. He says, I'm sorry. And I said, I'm sorry, too. And that has to be about the most exciting, because I was really, really, really broke up on that. I want to thank everybody here for this. Thank you.
Dick, walk up to the put your plaque in line with all the rest of the members. One or the other. Buddy, it's my pleasure to present to you. Buddy was the first president of New England Antique Racers, and it's very much my honor to follow in his shoes. It's time to club off. Your own plaque for yourself. Here are your programs. 1 to 10 was in here. Take one of them. Here's Randy Hall with our special jacket, the Hall of Fame member jacket, and a T-shirt. And welcome aboard. Thank you very much.
There's two groups of people that are probably underrepresented in this Hall of Fame, to whom we all owe a debt. It's easy to cheer for the driver. Sometimes it's not so easy to cheer for the car owner. They're a little more in the background. But without these people that own the race cars and bring them to the racetrack, provide the funding, search the sponsors, fire the mechanics, the volunteers, the gophers, there wouldn't be an auto racing sport. Well, if you take one step back from that, the people then that we really owe a debt to are the track owners and promoters. Having been in this business, I can tell you how frustrating it is to just work your heart out for a whole week trying to entice people to come to the races, all to see all your efforts hinge on whether or not it's raining in downtown at 3 p.m., something you have no control over. So the track owners and promoters are I think, an underappreciated group, and I'm very happy to see one of them being recognized tonight. And usually, the promoter is seen as the enemy of the driver. The promoters are making too much money off the tires, the gas, the beer, the hot dogs, the pit entry fee, everything. And so little trickles down to the driver. That's the usual relationship between drivers and promoters. So it's kind of neat tonight to see a driver honoring a promoter. And that driver, you may know him as late model Shoe Finch Fenton. You may know him as the fellow who shared a race car with Dick Bergman. They'd alternate driving and probably alternated paying the bills as things went. He is also one of the founders of the Spring Sizzler. He has been an advisor, a confidant to more people in racing than probably are willing to admit it, and has been the behind-the-scenes responsibility for a lot of the success that we see in this room tonight. Would you please welcome Lou Boyd.
Thank you, Mike. One day in 1961, Jim Landry caused quite a stir at Lee Raceway. He showed up with a radical rear-engine super, blasted from the back of the pack to the front, and promptly sheared off a light pole with a stuck throttle. Landry, who was an excellent modified and super modified driver, never raced that car again. Last week he commented, "That thing scared the wee-wee out of me." The amazing thing about this crude but quick creation was it had been built years and years before by a racing lifer by the name of Charlie Elliott. His driver, Bob Moore, had won every race the car entered and finished at Beech Ridge Speedway before it was outlawed. Building neat stuff by hand was certainly nothing new to Charlie Elliott. In the 30s, he built and raced tractor-type mud buggies at places like Farmington and Keene, New Hampshire, and under the lights at the Topsfield Fairgrounds in Massachusetts. After the enforced quiet of the war years, he built and drove V860 midgets before the enormous boom of the jalopies. Turning to more fabricating himself, he and driver Bob Guy won a ton in the stock cars, though a favorite memory was not actually a win. It was not a 24-lap race at Norwood Arena, it was a 24-hour race in which they started 51st and, despite massive mechanical problems, soldiered forth to an 8th place finishing position the next day. Charlie became active then in building track equipment, starting with a generating system for the Sanford Main Speedway. He then went a little bit south and built handmade grandstands and lights for the Dover, New Hampshire 5th mile paved oval. He ended up promoting that track and built a strong non-Ford field up there with a lot of sparky competitors known to near members, people like Fats Caruso, Trigger Watson, Red Barbeau, and Freddie Schultz. He also took a fling at promoting the infamous Riverside Speedway in Montreal, pitting some of the grisly dirt cars of guys like Kenny Shoemaker from New York against the super light cut-downs of people like Freddie Borden from New England against anything that Canada had to offer. In the early 60s, Charlie's huge and tireless hands built Star Speedway, an adventure made all the more dramatic by the arrival of his long-term partners, Ken Smith and Russ Conway. They formed the New England Supermodified Association and promoted many, many shows all over the Northeast and even toured in Florida and in Canada. Charlie and team subsequently rebuilt both Hudson and Lee Speedways, giving both facilities new leases on life. And they were known for spectacular promotions and really colorful entertainment. As Hudson and Lee and Star had been sold by the 90s, Charlie and wife June retired to the North Country, but those hands just kept on moving. He soon built 2 tracks, one dirt and one asphalt, on the same facility in Canaan, New Hampshire. And who is this dude, Humpy Wheeler, who thinks he's so special for having a dirt track next to Charlotte these days? In the thousands and thousands of races this modest, soft-spoken man has promoted, there's been an underlying theme of open competition, no-holds-barred racing. On a personal note, I expect I've raced at as many of his tracks as anyone else, other, of course, than those super guys who went on the NESMA tours. However, not once was our car teched. I'm not sure there was ever a technical inspector. Believe me, it was not NASCAR. But it was always a show, delivered with flair. Going to a NESMA race, you never quite know who was going to pull up to the pits next to you. It could be Ollie Silva, or it could be Buddy Baker, Rich Vogler, Dale Earnhardt, Bob McCready, or Senator Gordon Humphrey. Charlie did it his way. Basic, fun, wide-open way. More wit than wallet. The way it used to be. And so now it's time for all of us to use our hands, this time in applause for this great but quiet builder of speedways who played such an important role in the history of New England racing. May I present, for induction to the Near Hall of Fame, Mr. Charlie Elliott.
Thank you. I'm more nervous than you are. Oh, you're doing I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, but I'm here. I feel like a rooster. I do all the crowing, but your chickens are home laying the eggs. All these messes that I've got into, I didn't do by myself. I have 2 friends that stuck with me for 40 years and listened to me bitch and rave. I'd like to have them come up here with me right now. Kenny Smith and Mr. Conway. Could I do that? Hi, Kendall.
Hello.
Why not? You did it to me. You did it to me.
All right.
Hi, Kendall. So as you can see, I'm not a speaker, but I have a couple right here. Go ahead, say something, will you?
All right, I have a story about NESMA. They used to call us the 3 M's. This was the muscle, I was the money, and this is the mouth.
You say something.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed it. Actually, you know, you were the money, all right, but I'm still waiting for some money, you know?
Takes time, takes time.
But here's the muscle man, and I'll tell you, there's nobody anywhere in New England that ever put more into racing as far as building racetracks. In 1986, Lee Speedway could have been sold for land or industrial purposes. There was one thing that Charlie wanted, to keep it as a racetrack. That's how dedicated he is. Charlie, congratulations.
Okay, well, that's all right. I'm going to leave with you. I just want to say that without my wife and family, nobody would be here, all right? Thank you very much.
you guide him up? This is the important part, when you hang your plaque alongside of everyone else's. My pleasure to present you with a plaque that you can take home for your family and your great-grandchildren and their children to always remember the great accomplishments. Here's our lottery for the #1 program, whatever one you think is possible. Randy Hall's got your special membership jacket. I think so. Thank you very much.
There's an old saw in Hollywood about advice for would-be successful actors, and it says never work with dogs or children. Let me add to that list practical jokers. Our next speaker was New England's big national racing hero. He is a member of your Hall of Fame. His license plate reads Champ 4 because 4 times he won what is now NASCAR's Busch Grand National Championship, bringing great honor to this part of the country. In fact, he and Bugsy Stevens convinced me that if you wanted to be a racing champion, you just had to smoke cigars. There was just no other way around it. He, after his driving career, he's tried to start a Hall of Fame, try to promote racetracks. He had a radio show for a while, and the lead to commercial would always be, well, now we got to go pay for some of this here show. He wasn't polished, but he sure got the job done in his own inimitable way. So it is with just the slightest bit of trepidation that I introduce Dirt Champ, Rennie Charland.
Hi, Joey. Hi, Mike. How do we handle this here?
You make a nice speech, you try to say something nice about the person you're inducting. They come up, they say a few things about you.
I don't even like that guy.
And then there's a plaque.
I don't even like the guy I
Inducting.
inducting.
Yeah.
I don't even like him.
Okay. Well, now we got to go pay for some of this here show.
I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here. When I look at the people out there, I don't recognize a lot of them, but there's some I recognize, and I really appreciate it. Now you take all these Hall of Famers up there, and if you have a 25-lapper with them, you're going to have a hell of a race. And I'll tell you one thing, like they said, they used to have 100 to 125 cars that qualify Riverside Park, and I believe that's one of the only tracks that I used to have to change the bumpers every week. That's a fact. And I think we all enjoyed it. Buddy Krebs knows what I mean, I guess, don't you, buddy? And my friend, Ronnie Narducci, we've been together for quite a few years in different type racing and everything else like that. Sometimes he liked me, and other times he didn't. I have for no reason at all. But I know that he deserves to be up here like I was, and it takes a lot of hard work for him and his family both. And I present Ronnie Narducci. Come up here and get your location. I think you have a couple things you want to say about me, don't you? That's going to be the best part. He's the only guy, he don't have to carry a grease gun to grease his car.
I've had to put up with this guy on the racetrack for over 15 years.
Well, you call me a son
And
of a
now I
bitch. Now,
still got to put up with him.
you call me a son of a bitch, then why don't you call me that now?
Because I
mellowed.
nominated you?
I've mellowed.
Oh, you mellowed. Ronnie, congratulations. I'm glad you're up here, and I wish to say a few words to the people here.
I got a few words I would like to say, really.
Say 'em.
I could stand here for a good 15, 20 minutes and tell you stories about this guy, not only on the racetrack, but things that happened off the racetrack.
Wow.
And one in particular, we had a little incident one night at Albany, Saratoga, and I kind of thought that maybe Rini was at fault when I wound up off the third turn somewhere. And I went in the pits and I picked up my 2-foot stacking wrench and headed for his area. All his crew all took off. I didn't find Rini anywhere, but by that time I'd cooled off. And as it turned out that night, I lost an engine. And the next morning, we were down at Margaret Bosley's having breakfast about 8 o'clock down at L&R Speed. And door opens, in comes this guy. What the hell are you doing? Feeding your face? Come on, we're going to change that engine. We got to get going. And that's the way racing was in those days. You could hate him 1 minute and love him the next.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's why you went in the boonies there at first, because you weren't going fast enough, so you backed into me.
And then another little story, God rest his soul. Our good friend who is gone at this time, Georgie Pendergast.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. We used to race Old Bridge, New Jersey on Sunday nights. And that meant he had to come from Agawam, and I was coming from East Haddam, Connecticut. And somewhere along the way, we usually catch up with one another, either on the New York leg of the Connecticut Turnpike or on the Jersey Pike or whatever.
We're going through the Bronx.
And he was coming down, towing his car, and George had broke his car down. And Rini picked him up, unbeknownst to me. And I caught up with him, and we're riding along. And also unbeknownst to me, these guys bought a watermelon. Now they're scooping the watermelon out and throwing it out the truck windows. And I'm getting it all over my truck, all over the race car, so forth and so
Look at
on.
the windshield.
We get to Old Bridge, which was a mecca for mosquitoes anyway. We couldn't even get near the car to work on it. I had to dive in, put it in gear, take off on the racetrack just to get rid of the mosquitoes. Now, isn't that true?
Of course. Well, you got to remember one thing. I think you forgot one thing. Remember that little peel from the watermelon that I threw right across from my car to your car, and went just about in a little space like that, the window came right in to hit the guys. Remember that?
You're so proud of yourself, aren't you?
I tell you, I could have won. I could have won a gold medal on that thing. But I'll tell you one thing. I know we did a lot of things. I know Ronnie did a lot of things. We all did a lot of things. In them days, we weren't rich people where we have to sit behind, come in with a tie, not swear or anything else like that. But see, we don't have much of education, like the smartest Polak is education. And we're not one of them, But I tell you, we have, I believe we had about just as much education in racing as anybody there is, ain't it?
If you say so.
Okay. Okay, now, I guess, what do I do? Give him a trophy?
Go in front and take a picture with the present it to him. Don't burn it with the cigar. Go around the front so they get a good picture.
You just get out of the way a minute.
Don't fall. Please don't fall.
If I can get rid of this guy for just a few minutes, I want to thank Al Feeney and all his members and the nominating committee and the members of the press and so forth and so on that made this, that's making this and everything that NEAR is standing for on this Hall of Fame deal possible. It's really you know, when you gave up racing in '82 and 18 years later, you come to a gathering like this and people remember you. That really means something. I want to thank you very much.
Ronnie, watch out he doesn't feel it. Watch out he doesn't feel it.
I got a hold of it.
Rainey, show them how to get to the board. Let us follow you. You place yours right in line with all the rest of them. Right on the pole. Right in the... Spin around. That's it. Ronnie, it's my pleasure to send you the plaque and take home. Come on. Look here, one of these is number one. Randy Hall, that is your special club members from Jack. I hope you wear it with pride. Club t-shirt. Thanks, Jack. Thank you.
Now, Rini says they weren't rich back then, but they were pretty rich in friends. And that means a lot. Our next speaker is the head of the nominating committee for the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame. He can tell you anything you ever wanted to know about racing in the state of Rhode Island and a lot of other places too. He's the historian of Seekonk Speedway and just has a vast treasure trove of racing memorabilia and results and history. R.A. Sylvia, come on up, please.
Thank you, Mike, and that's a tough act to follow, Rini. But I'm here to present the award for Ralph Moody. Now, Webster's Dictionary defines hero as one who is greatly regarded for his achievements or qualities. And to me, Ralph Moody fit that description precisely. When I was a mere lad of 5, auto racing resumed in the latter part of 1945 after World War II, and Ralph Moody became one of my first heroes among the group of midget drivers that were just starting their string of popularity that lasted until the turn of the decade when the stock cars started to take the top spot in New England. Now, Ralph attained success in both types of cars, and particularly in the early modified coupes. So it was that I followed his career from Taunton, Mass., through Dania, Florida, and eventually to Mooresville, North Carolina. And this ran from the 40s through the 80s, and he always made me proud. He was a tall, quiet Yankee that started out a mere 20 miles from my Rhode Island border town home. When the midgets arrived in our area in the mid-30s, Ralph took a liking to them, and he soon built his own from various Ford bits and pieces. He started getting rides in, among others, the cars of Nat Whitney, Brad Winters, and the Bouchard brothers, not Ronnie and Ken. They were way, way too young. When the stock cars took over, the Winters number 28 became one of the top cars in the southeastern New England circuit, particularly at Norwood, Mass. And Lonsdale, Rhode Island. Moody was now wintering in Florida,
and with the weekly arrival of the Illustrated Speedway News, we felt a bit of pride seeing his name prominently as he was steadily whipping up on the Southerners, especially at Miami's Opelika Speedway. He soon set up permanent residence in the South, and he eventually hooked up with the Ford factory team under Pete DiPaolo and ran the Grand National circuit, teaming up with the Westerner John Holman. And one of the earliest car-building dynasties then began, the Holman and Moody organization. And in those days, you saw H&M on a car and knew that thing was going to go. Besides making a Life magazine photo spread for a rollover sequence on the beach at Daytona, Ralph's best driving year in the big time was 1956. He finished 8th in points in the Grand National circuit, and he had 4 wins and 5 pole positions. After a lone NASCAR win in 1957 and a brief tour with the USAC late models, he then concentrated on the car building end of things. Holman and Moody always had the top drivers, such as Fred Lorenzen, Dan Gurney, Bobby Allison, Fireball Roberts, Curtis Turner, Joe Weatherly, Marvin Panch, Mario Andretti, and among others. All told, H&M cars captured 92 Grand National wins, and David Pearson won the championship for them in both in 1968 and 1969. Ralph pioneered developments in shock absorbers, weight jackers, tube frames, floater rear ends, and many of his concepts are still being used today in varying degrees. He was called by Circle Track magazine every crew chief's godfather. While preparing this brief speech, we thought back a few of the early tales from the Taunton days that we heard around the tracks, even though I was a very young man, such as his garage behind the Masonic home on Route 44 on the west side of town. Many early stock car racers were always welcome in there, and Ralph would help them out and give them tips. But there was one big exception, though. In the back corner, he had an area that was blocked off by a large canvas. When Ralph went behind here, he was making his special fuel mixture. This was one spot there was absolutely no admittance to. And if you ever see Matt Goff at Seacock, he'll tell you uncertainly how quickly he was physically ejected for trying to enter this restricted area. And then there was one time when the race car was plumb out of engines. So Ralph called up his sister Thelma and asked if he could borrow her 1947 Mercury overnight, which she did, and they took it down to the garage and back on the Masonic home and quickly pulled the engine out, dropped it in the stock car, went up to Norwood, cleaned house, went back in the wee hours of the morning, put the engine back in Thelma's car, and Ralph dropped it over the house and said, "Thank you very much." Ralph Moody is a member of the National Drag Racing Hall of Fame, and he was inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame at Talladega, Alabama in 1994. And now the man who has made me and all New Englanders proud for over 50 years rightfully takes his place in our own Hall of Fame. And I think accepting the award on behalf of Ralph, who couldn't make it up, will be Bugsy Stevens. Thank you.
Ralph was a friend of mine. He was one of our local heroes as we were growing up, and I'm sure he'll be very happy about this. I wish he was here tonight. Ralph's 83, by the way, and still a crazy driver.
Yeah, well, just hang one in cemetery, memory for him, and then you just hang it with Harry. Yeah, I'll take care of it. Just to let you know, we just found out 2 nights ago that Ralph Moody was planning to come in, but he was snowed out in Charlotte, and he was afraid to make the trip because of last week's major snowstorm down there. So I just asked Bugsy when he came in the door if he would just step up, because Ralph had suggested it. Bugsy had been a long-time protege, and when they were both very young and et cetera, and they always followed each other's crew. And I understand that Ralph at one point tried to get Bugsy to stay further down south and mix it up with the big boys, which he went down for a few times, but he never followed Ralph's advice, much to our pleasure up here in New England, but probably much to the displeasure of all the United States auto racing fans.
Our next speaker has been involved in our sport for more than 35 years. He's a past president of the Maine State Stock Car Racing Association, a former track champion in his own right, and since 1990 he's been the track announcer at Beech Ridge Motor Speedway in Scarborough, Maine. Would you welcome Bruce Elder?
Thank you, Mike. Certainly a pleasure to be here and to participate in this special occasion. And I'll bet that due to these Hall of Fame events, many of us have dug out more scrapbooks, photo albums, and shoeboxes filled with newspaper clippings, photos, and race programs than perhaps we ever knew existed. But isn't it fun to reminisce? Well, my earliest memory of Homer Drew dates back to the early 60s when Bob Bushley asked him to drive his race car. I remember that vividly because about that time I was a high school kid hanging around Bob Bushley's shop trying to learn what I could from one of the masters. Like many others, I was a little surprised at Bob's choice because I'd only seen this Homer Drew as a rather rough and tumble type driver whose style hadn't yet resulted in a lot of success on the track. Well, time would prove that Bob Bushley had tremendous insight. He had seen something special in that rough and tumble driver. He'd seen a natural with tenacity and awesome talent. That was the beginning of a partnership that would become historic at Beech Ridge and beyond. They began winning and just kept on winning. It's one of the handicaps of being tall. By the mid-60s, Homer was not only driving Bob Bushley's P-38, but he was also driving Jerry Seavey's number 22 modified coupe. Double feature wins were not uncommon. In fact, he won 7 double features in one season and set a record by winning 4 feature events in one evening. Homer captured the Beech Ridge Super Modified Championship in 1967 and again in '68, along with the B-Modified title. During that time, he virtually dominated both divisions. Not an easy task on the then unique Beech Ridge dirt. One Sunday afternoon in May of '73, Homer won both the A and B features at Beech Ridge, followed those victories with a quick drive up to Oxford Plains, about 50 miles away, where he finished second in the first of 2 100-lap Getty Opens and rounded out the evening by winning the second. If you think about that for a moment, in the afternoon on the Beech Ridge dirt in a super modified and a modified coupe, and then in the evening on the asphalt at Oxford Plains against some of the best New England drivers at the time. What versatility. During an interview, Jerry Seavey once said of Homer, "The biggest thing is he won't quit. Even if he's a lap down, he drives as though he's leading. And if the race is long enough, he will be." Homer has driven just about every type of race car, from the old coupes to modifieds, late models, super modifieds, and sprints, and he's won with them all. A total of 5 championships at Beech Ridge, 3 in the super modifieds, and 2 in the modified coupes. I think we'd all agree that there are athletes whose presence raises the level of competition, and Homer Drew was certainly that type of racer. He became so associated with winning that should his car break down, he would almost always be offered a ride, and the amazing thing was he would take a totally strange car and make it a contender that night. There were a number of occasions when what had been an also-ran car would sit in victory lane for the first time, thanks to Homer. There are a number of unique memories and stories of this driver's talent, but perhaps none more amazing than the infamous story of the vice grips. One night, the steering wheel broke off on the P-38 at Beech Ridge. Homer pitted on a restart. In those days, you could pit in the infield. The owner and a couple of the crew members were in the infield. When he pulled in, he handed the steering wheel to Bob Bushley. Bob quickly pulled his vice grips, which were ever present in his pocket, and the two of them clamped the vice grips onto the P-38, and Homer Drew went back into competition, steering the car with the help of the vice grips. Unbelievable, but it happened because I was there. Many of you will remember well that by the 70s, Homer was dominating the Getty Opens at Oxford Plains. In '73, he won 5 of 7 100-lap Opens against some of the best New England drivers at the time. In fact, he won an Open at every track in Maine. We believe he's the only driver to accomplish that. Every now and then, we hear someone say that a driver just drove the wheels off the car. Well, Homer could and would do just that. There was the time he started on the front row at Sanea with Tiny Lund and just drove away. No easy task, as many of you remember, to drive away from Tiny Lund. He worked the car so hard through the tricky paved turns that he finally broke the rear end housing loose and the car blew a tire. There were times he would lap the entire field in an open event. Well, I believe Dick Berggren captured the kind of racer Homer Drew was in an article which appeared in the 1974 Stock Car Racing magazine. And I think many of you will probably remember that well. The article is entitled, "Who Said Maine is Conservative?" and was a recap of the first Oxford 250, which in fact, we'll all remember, I think, was a 200. Dick writes, "The outside of the home chute has a serious negative camber, which has been serrated to prevent competitors from running on it and thus off the wall. People who were really running just got the right rear near it and no further. The winner ran his right rear over it. Tiny Lund was real brave and hung both right side wheels over it. Homer Drew had all 4 wheels over it, driving the pavement like a dirt track. Which brings the story round full tilt to the guy who was fastest and maybe should have won. Homer is the Maine man. He's the spectacular guy who drives anything and wins even if the wheels are falling off. Tonight in his heat, he drew a back spot. With few to qualify, the gas had to be pressed, and Homer was in it when the metal started bending. Back to the rear, then back to the front. 3 wide, 4 wide, he didn't care. But up in the stands they cared as thousands of Maine accents were going, 'Get 'em, Homer!' That's H-O-M-A-A-H. He did and qualified easily. In the feature, he was running strongly, picking up cars every lap. My God, he's fastest, somebody in the pits realized. Then crash. Fenders, A-arms, everything on the CV Special was bent. Even Homer couldn't make it go, and that meant nobody could. So they parked it, and they sat there for 70 laps or so. Then someone realized the right front had gone flat. That's why Homer couldn't drive it. It had a flat. They quickly put a tire on, and off he went. And in a few laps, remember he's probably 75 laps down, and nowhere in competition, he caught the leader and passed him in a spectacular move. I knew he was a lap down, said the then leader, George Summers, but after he passed me, I figured I'd follow him because I knew no one was going to go any faster than him. By the way, the control arms on Drew's car were still bent, and he could hardly walk because his foot was in a partial cast from an earlier injury. Homer's sensational. Thanks, Dick, for so aptly describing Homer's incredible style. Well, time doesn't permit recalling all the many highlights of such an outstanding career, but after attempting to retire in the late 70s, Homer was called on a Friday night in 1980 and asked to drive a late model in Sunday's upcoming AutoWise 100 at Beech Ridge. The owner confessed that his car had not finished better than 11th thus far. Homer said he would come down and try the car on Saturday night. He did and won the feature from the rear. He came back on Sunday, qualified for Sunday's big race, then led 95 of 100 laps to win the AutoWise 100. On the cover of Speedway Scene's next issue, it read, "Out of retirement and back to his winning ways." Well, Homer Drew has been honored by every special award extended by Beech Ridge Motor Speedway. He's one of just 31 to receive the coveted Memorial Blazer Award. He's been inducted into the Beech Ridge Hall of Fame, and in 1999, he was recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award. You know, Abe Lincoln once said, if you want to test a man's character, give him power. And I think one could substitute the word popularity for power. Well, popularity never changed Homer Drew. He was always the same. He had time for people, and he didn't forget those who helped him along the way. He had what I think is probably the most important trait for success, and that's a good attitude. I believe that Homer lived the adage, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. I'm pleased that many of Homer's family are here to share this special occasion with him. I think a party of 11 came down with him. His immediate family, his wife Debbie, sons Ricky and Gary, his daughter Wanda, and grandson Eric. Unfortunately, daughter Pam is in Alaska and unable to attend. Jerry Seavey is in Florida, but his son Tim and Tim's son are here, and I'm also very pleased that Bob Bushley, the man who jump-started Homer's career, is able to be here with us as well. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to ask Homer Drew to come forward as the first racer from the state of Maine to be inducted into the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame. Homer?
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well deserved.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to Nia for the induction into the Hall of Fame, and I'd also like to thank Bruce, which is a very good friend of mine, and like he said, since the early 60s, and thank him for coming up here and for the introduction and taking the time to do it, and his lovely wife, Cindy, and I really appreciate it, Bruce. Thank you. And as I think back as a young fella, about 45 years or so ago, and just starting out wanting to drive, that's all I wanted to do was drive a race car and drive it as fast as I could. And there was a few years there that nothing really happened, and for some reason, as Bruce said, Bob Bushley, the man that really gave me the opportunity to come out here, you know, to get started racing. I don't know what he's seeing me, but evidently there was something, and so I owe him the thanks for getting me started and what we accomplished over the years, and Jerry Seavey, which he's not here today, as Bruce said, but if it really weren't for those two, that I probably wouldn't be here standing here today, and I really appreciate it. And as Dave Humphrey said a while ago when he first got up there about his trophy ladies there, well, I found my trophy lady at Beech Ridge Speedway, and I married her. And like Bruce said, we have 4 lovely children and 6 grandchildren that I love dearly. And so I want to thank you all, and thank you.
next to him. Turn to the cameras.
Our next speaker is no enigma, but he's a little hard to categorize. He's been a car owner, been a race team sponsor, a promoter, a writer, and even a radio talk show host. He was 1/3 of the triumvirate that created the Spring Sizzler, and he was once the proprietor of what was known throughout New England as the Jewish Lightning Racing Team. You'll have to ask him what that means. He's also had a habit of reinventing himself. Back when Dick Berggren was professor at a college in Boston, some of his friends would drop by his class to observe and hopefully entice Bergie to go out for a beer or two after. And of course, it was a girls' college, so our visits were kind of frequent. During one of these visits, Bruce was trying to pass himself off to some comely co-eds as a man of the cloth, as Rabbi Cohen. He was in fact a man of the cloth. He owned a used clothing and rag business. But he has always been passionate and opinionated about our sport and never reluctant to share those opinions with us, as I'm sure he will today. Bruce Cohen.
Thank you, Mike. I would like to digress for a minute. As I've gone through life, through school and business, you get to meet a lot of people. And there are a lot of significant people, many of whom are in this room today. I would just like to take a minute to recognize a man who is in a Hall of Fame, but not a racing Hall of Fame. As real hockey fans know, I think Bug Stevens would know, a few years ago there was a big hockey scandal where Alan Eagleson, out of Canada, stole a lot of money from the Hockey Players Retirement Fund. One of the people in this room, a person I've raced for, I fought with, he threatened to sue me, I threatened to punch his lights out, worked on this scandal for over 5 years. He helped break Alan Eagleson and get a lot of money back for the National Hockey League players. And in November, Mr. Russ Conway was inducted to the National Hockey League Hall of Fame. Russ, would you stand up for a minute? There he is hiding in the corner. So it proves that racing people can do other things and get into Hall of Fames beside racing, but this is the most important. I would like to thank NEAR for giving me this opportunity to induct Mario Fats Caruso into the NEAR Hall of Fame. 40 years ago, some of my high school motorhead friends said to me, "Hey Bruce, you really got to go over to the Norwood Arena to see these stock cars." I said, okay. They would tell me about epic battles on the racetrack between the V8, the $, the J2, and the 69. On that first important trip to the Norwood Arena, Fats Caruso came from deep in the field to win the 25-lap modified feature, driving the Worcester Sand and Gravel number 69. From that moment on, a fat little red-headed kid from Brookline was hooked. And I've been still at it. In the 1940s, Fats Caruso started his racing career driving B-modifieds, bombers, whatever you want to call them. After a few years, he moved on to the modifieds and the cut-downs. Victories came at such venues as Lonsdale, Rhode Island, Groveland, Mass., Hudson, New Hampshire, Seekonk, Westboro, and the Norwood Arena. His career really started to take off. In one remarkable season at Westboro, Fats Caruso won 22 of 28 features won. Another year, driving the number 79 six-cylinder bomber for Dave Welch and the late Greg Baby Huey Mills out of Needham, Mass., Fats won close to 40 features. That is incredible. The late Greg Mills used to tell me when Fats got in the car, you always had a payday. He also used to tell me that they ran for Charlie Elliott, one of today's inductees, up to Dover, and a B feature with a six-cylinder modified would pay $500–600. This was in the late 50s. Not bad going. Fats also won a NERA Super Modified, then called Cut Down Championships, driving the famed Circle 2 racer. By the late 50s, Fats had established himself as one of New England's premier racers. Dubbed the Shrewsbury Flash by announcer Joe Ross, Fats Caruso was well worth the price of admission. The telltale sign of a smoking right rear M&H tire on the Worcester Sand number 69 meant that the always aggressive Caruso was on his way to the front. Feature wins were frequent. Around 1963, Caruso and the Worcester Sand and Gravel Troupe began to travel a bit away from New England. As one who was there on a hot August afternoon, Fats Caruso's spectacular win over a rapidly closing Ray Hendrick, we all remember him, in the Trenton 200 was a race for the ages. Fats Caruso had arrived. After Fats's win at Trenton on that memorable day in 1963, the Frontier Club on South Broad Street in Trenton has never been the same. Other victories on the road came at Old Bridge, New Jersey, Utica, and Malta, New York. Mario Fats Caruso was a top runner and always considered a threat to win. Fats Caruso, make no doubt about it, was like Homer Drew, one tough customer. One night at an open competition show at Westboro in the early 60s, Fats totally demolished the number 69 cutdown. Undaunted, the crew returned to their Worcester garage, loaded up the modified, returned to Westboro, where Fats promptly went out and won the feature event. In June of 1968, Fats was involved in a horrific crash at the Thompson, Connecticut Speedway. For 4 days in a row, he was given the last rites of the Catholic Church. Recovering from these injuries, Fats Caruso was once again a contending racer through the 70s and into the 1980s. As his career wound down, Fats drove the family modified at Stafford and Thompson. His final career modified win was a real good one. Victory in the 1984 Thompson 300, driving for Billy Ross out of Warwick, Rhode Island. Fats retired after the 1984 season, but would come back for an annual outing in 1988, 89, and 91 at the World Series at Thompson to race in a pro stock against his son David. After a battle with cancer, Mario Caruso passed away in 1993. 3 years later, his son David also succumbed to a heart attack. In a career that was all too brief, David Caruso won 35 features and 3 track championships. Interestingly enough, Fats Caruso and his son David are 2 on the list of outstanding drivers who drove the famed 2X of Bobby Judkins. The Caruso family tradition continues as Jeff Caruso, the son of Michael Caruso, who is Fats' oldest son, continues to compete in a pro stock at Thompson. I think the racing world, who admired, respected, and loved Fats Caruso, can pay him its highest compliment today. Fats Caruso was and always will be called a racer. I'd like to have Mike Caruso and the family come up to accept the award.
I want to thank Bruce. He did an excellent tribute to my father, and I'm sure he's listening, because he was never known to miss a party. I was very fortunate, being the oldest in the family, to see my father's era, where he peaked out in the early 60s and stuff. And being involved with 3 generations of drivers, that era there was the best. The people then were unbelievable. You know, being involved as an owner now, and you see it's all business-like. Back then, you raced hard, you fought hard, but then you went and had a beer with the guy and enjoyed it and talked to him. Nowadays, nobody will talk to you. Nobody, after a race, after you beat him or whatever, We're proud as a family. My family, I always did stand up. Donnie, Ellen, my brother Paul. We miss David. Our father and our brother, they were our heroes, and they still are. And, as a representative of this family, on behalf, I want to thank all of you, congratulate all the inductees, and just thank you very much.
Mike, you want to hang your father's plaque? Then turn this way so I'll get the picture. We'll go, put it on the rack. That's the ceremony that's will always be recorded. Look to us as you're doing it. My pleasure to present the plaque to the Crusoe family, so you'll always remember your father's achievements for generations to come. We have a raffle here for the #1 program, and we have a I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Our next scheduled speaker is former Danbury and Waterford standout, and oh yeah, also twice NASCAR Busch Series champion, Randy LaJoie. But rain down in Daytona Beach this week delayed some of their preseason testing, and he's unable to be with us this afternoon. He said on one of the national TV shows this morning how much he wished he could be in Connecticut this afternoon with his family and all of you folks. So we're sorry Randy is not here. But in his stead is the gentleman who has made sure for decades that everyone within reach of the Norwalk Hour knows that auto racing is a major sport and how big a part of it are the LaJoies and have been for these many years. Charlie Mitchell.
Thank you, Mike, and I'd like to accept my congratulations to all the recipients and all the inductees. You mentioned earlier, Mike, about the accidents in Danbury, and when you think, in fact, Don LaJoie won 58 features, a lot of people don't realize he started driving at what is not a reasonably young age when you consider he was 26 years old. He took 2 years off to go to college at Stafford, which didn't fare too well, but he got going in the end, and he came back and won 3 consecutive championships. But I think the thing that you have to know about Don, as much as he loved to win, I think being an innovator and working on his cars was what thrilled him more. I mean, he was playing with tires long before anybody else, shocks, springs, you name it. He would think nothing of taking the car completely apart after it won and finding why, try and make it better. Even, no matter what he did, there was always something on the side with Don. Going to Stafford, his most claim to fame at Stafford was going out of the track. It was the first car ever to go out, and good old buddy, he took care of everybody, and he came back to Danbury with a vengeance. And what he learned at Stafford, he used to the utmost. There were times when there was a lot of stuff that if I could have written about half of the things he was doing or going on, and they either loved Donnie or they hated him. And there was a lot of people that let me know that he wasn't one of their favorites. But he, as I say, persevered through everything. And when it came time to make the move, he was there. And he's always been that way, because he never, no matter what he does it with perfection. And they say, you know, Randy, a lot of people say, oh, Randy's great to talk to. He tells them meet anything they want. Well, he had a great teacher, because his father is still one of the best, and it was never a dull moment. There was the time that Don and his crew had a few beers after, which they did each week after races, like most people. And Don's 2 men towed the car back from Danbury. The problem was it came off the trailer, and the compound manners, they never knew it. They went 5 miles before somebody flagged them down. And the car was... And there's things, it still goes on to this day. Now, you might have seen Don's car out in front. Well, Jim Torok, who was here as a near member, he made arrangements to have the car brought here. And he was, Carmine Sarosi, who was a longtime friend and comrade of Don's, was supposed to deliver the car Thursday night to Jim Torok's home. Well, never showed up. Finally, Torok, the neighbor, came yesterday and says, "You expecting a race car?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "It's in my garage." They delivered the wrong house, but that's typical. It still goes on 15 years after, after the fact. But as I say, he accomplished an awful lot in a short time between when he started racing and the 2 years he took out. And my personal best, as far as I'm concerned, was something he didn't win, is when he went to Trenton in 1972, and I believe it was 114, 116 cars trying to get probably 25 spots, because after guaranteed starters, that was about all that's left. He had never been on a track, and he was near that size. And he qualified 10th. And I mean, that was an awesome show in my book. And of course, as usual, he went out in the flare because the engine blew, and he damn near went in the lake out by the dog leg. But, and there were some bad times. Thought we almost lost him at Pocono when that fire got so hot it melted the helmet on the face shield on his mask. And I still recall his father calling me probably at midnight, and his father spoke, it was French, very broken French. And my son, he hurt bad. My son, he's hurt bad. I said, "No, Frank, he's going to be all right." But he spent some time in the Allentown hospital, and then they transferred him to Bridgeport, Connecticut Burn Center. And I remember going up there with Jimmy Smith, and a long-time Norwalk racer at Danbury also. In fact, even Don's first feature, he couldn't do anything normal. He and Jimmy Smith finished in dead heat. First time and only time, I believe, in the feature. Jim Seeley is one of the officials. He may recall if it's happened since, but I don't think it did. But anyways, Smitty and I were talking to him, and he could care less. He was telling jokes, and "I'll be back racing. Don't worry about me." And I'm tough, and believe me, he is tough. But he's a wonderful man, a wonderful family man. And his wife, Kathy, 42 years she's put up with him. I don't know how the hell you do it, but... And Missy, his daughter, is here, and if I talk too much longer, there may be another LaJoy grandchild, because she's about due. Excuse me. But she'll weather the storm, right? Linda's here, that's her other daughter. Unfortunately, Ronnie is no longer with us, but I'm sure he's looking down at his father and pretty proud. And Randy is Randy. He, believe me, I talked to him 4 times this week, and he was trying. He had 2 test sessions in Talladega, had a personal appearance, he had a TV show today, and there was no way that he could make it. But he did send a little letter to his dad. I'll get us here. We'll see what I'm gonna need my cheaters on this one, though. Hang on. If I got them. Right. I won't be long, George. You're next. And I know Ronnie's anxious to get up there. Okay. Dad, sorry I can't be you at such a memorable event in your life. It would have been an honor for me to introduce you and to be present when you joined such an impressive list of great race drivers being inducted today, as well as those people already enshrined in the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame. I want to congratulate you on a wonderful career. You've been a role model to me, a great father, a credit to racing. Your driving ability was second to none. I know how hard you work to make your cars go faster and be better than the next guys. Thank you for all your support through the years, your weekly phone calls. This is parentheses, some bad, some good. I guess that's, you kind of chew them out once in a while, but are looked upon by me as another example of your efforts to help me. Congratulations to you. And to all the other inductees today, I watched all of you race at one time or another. I'm trying to carry on in the New England tradition the best I can. Randy. Okay.
To stay here. No. Well, it's going to be hard to duplicate some of the speeches. I'd like to thank Charlie and congratulate all of the other 9 inductees into the Hall of Fame. I want all of you to know
that I'm very proud and honored to be one of the first drivers from the Danbury SNYRA to be inducted into the Near Hall of Fame. SNYRA was the start of my racing career in the 60s, and my son in the 80s. Not many race dads can say that they were able to compete along with their son, but I can. I gotta take a breath here. Southern New York Racing Association gave that chance. It sent Randy on his way to bigger things. And for me, I stand up here tonight accepting this precious award. Thank all you members of NEAR Committee for recognizing me to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. To my family, my wife Kathy, my friends, my local fans, and dedicated crew. And it's all the support over the years, and with the faith of God, guidance would help me achieve this special award. Thank you all for coming, and God bless you all.
As you can tell, neither one of us are thrilled to be speakers. I tell you, I've known Don, we've known each other since we were 6 years old in St. Joseph's School. I don't think they didn't teach us, the nuns weren't that good at teaching us to speak.
Charlie, you and Don take a picture right in front. Come on over. Don and Charlie, walk over, present, put your place, plaque in place with all the rest of the heroes.
I still remember that.
That's not yours. You forgot his shirt. That's not yours. You forgot.
Red flag, red flag.
Is there anybody in the room who doesn't have a Renee Charland story? I didn't think so. Do not want to stand in Randy LaJoie's pit during a race, because his dad stands on top of the box and it's like he's swatting at some imaginary demon or something. Well, he's driving the car for Randy. You do not want to stand in their pit. There's just not enough room. One of the great things about a dinner like this and about a Hall of Fame like this, he's still trying to collect for that charity. He got some money out of Leo Cleary a little while ago. I saw him do it. Leo, it's the Me Foundation. Don't let him fool you. Is that in situations like this, and you look at the names and the pictures on those plaques, and time stands still. It's funny how some people can captivate a crowd at a racetrack, some with their daring do behind the wheel, and some with the way they maybe speak on the microphone after winning a race or sign autographs to the fans. And some rare people have the gift of being able to do it with just a smile. Our final presenter, we know as a former champion of Westboro and Stafford, and a winning racer on what was then the Modified Tour, as the Talladega 500 winner and Winston Cup Rookie of the Year. But best of all of us in this room will always know him as the Kid from Fitchburg, Ron Bouchard.
Well, thank you, Mike. That was a very gracious introduction. This gray hair proves that I'm not a kid anymore. And I got to fix this mic, because that last tall guy, he had a lot of trouble with this thing. See, that's all you had to do was bend it right there. You know, I've got a little bit of a problem here tonight, or today. It started this afternoon, I guess. Yeah, I had my speech memorized. I forgot it. I came in and I met a few hundred or 300 of George's closest friends that came on the bus from Upton. So they all got me cornered out here. A couple of them got me in a bathroom. And they said, look, get up there and give it to him. I said, this is not a roast. You're supposed to get up here and say some nice things about Gentleman George. So as you can see, I didn't prepare for that, but George, the next time they roast you, I told all of your friends out there that I will prepare for that and I will be one of the roastees. So you can prepare for that. Today won't be the day, George. It looks like a nice crowd out here. I couldn't tell them everything I know about you. It wouldn't be right. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today to induct one of New England's finest race drivers, but also one of my best friends. But before I start, I'd like to thank Al Feeney and all the people that work at NEAR, Mike Joy for graciously entertaining us for 3 years, and all the folks that work very hard at putting this together. It's a great thing for race drivers, track owners, crew members. Like somebody said up here, sometimes after you leave and they don't watch you win in races anymore, they forget about you. Things like this here brings us old guys back, and I think they deserve a hand. In 1968, when I came to Seekonk, I said, who's the guy to beat here? And they said, George Summers. So I said, okay. I go out, I follow him. We spend many laps in practice going around the bottom of the racetrack, and I said, holy crap, if I'm going to beat this guy, all I got to do is go around him. But that wasn't as easy as it looked, because many of you out here got on the outside of him. And that was a tough chore. George would let you get up there, but then that was it. Then the right rear would come this way. Then it was in the Nerf bar. Then it was in the door. And you'd look down and he'd have his head out the window. And he'd be still kicking up the dirt down there. So George gave me a little training at Seekonk. He taught me how to get around that place. A lot of his car owners said, George, you're not running a driving school for this young kid. He says, yeah, but I think he can be pretty good. I'm going to help him. Well, the next 5 years, I became track champion at Seekonk. So his help was very good. So George was very gracious in escorting me to Stafford. He says, let me get you hooked up over there. And he says, you can race at that racetrack. He said, there's a lot of guys you can run against over there. So George was very gracious and helped me get to Stafford, meet some very nice people, begin my career in NASCAR, which was a great beginning to a great career in racing and in people. So George, I thank you for that. After a few years, I left, started racing Thompson, Stafford. My buddy comes to Thompson, and George comes over and he says, you run pretty good here, could you help me? I said, sure, George, everything you've done for me. So I spent some time with him in practice, show him how to pass. Feature starts, I'm in the back, he's in the front. And I get clear through the traffic, and I look up there, and there's that 21. He's got me by a straightaway. I said, holy crap, he's really running good. He took the lessons real good. So we're going down the backstretch, 2 laps to go. I catch George, and somebody blows up. Big cloud of smoke. So by the time I got to him, I had no brakes left. I was driving for Bobby Judkins, who doesn't put brakes on cars. And of course, Art Barry, he's got brakes off a 727 on this thing. So I see the smoke, and I see the back of the 21 go up, and I said, oh shit, look at this wreck. I hit him, spin him around, goes in the infield. So he's sitting there, and I go around the racetrack again. I come down the backstretch, and the mud and the dirt's flying, smoke everywhere. And I go by, and I go, he goes like this. My buddy, he says. I think the only time he ever got mad at me. Or maybe one other time. But that was the worst, George. I figured I better tell that story before he does. Because I've heard it a number of times from him. You know, you play golf and you go in a bar and George tells a few stories. See, he's got his cheering friends back there. They know what it's like. But over 30 years of competition, he has won over 200 races, from Virginia to Maine. But the highlight of them 200 wins has to be winning the last 2 races of his career. I can only imagine what that would be like. I was not that fortunate, and many of us in here never did. But for you, George, a great feat for a great race driver. Nowadays, the competition carries over from the racetrack to the golf course. During the summer and the rest of the time, you can find George on most golf courses in New England. In the winter, you can find him at his new office, the Village Tavern in Daytona Beach. I've always known George since 1968 should be institutionalized. And now, today, he's going to be into the near Hall of Fame. Come on up, Georgie. Now I'm going to fix this mic for you, George.
Thanks, buddy. I'm glad he didn't roast me as bad as what I thought he would. Now, Ron and I have been friends since he was a young boy, and we still do. We play golf together at least once a week, and I'm really pleased and proud that he was the one that was able to put me into this Hall of Fame. I have such great good memories from racing and all the people that I met, and I'm proud to be in this, very proud to be with Leo, Bugsy, all the fellas that I raced with for many years. And actually some of the dearest friends I have today come from racing. Arthur Barry, I drove for him for 7 years, Connie LaJoy, Bobby Smith up in Maine, just some of the greatest people. And they are my dearest friends. And I had a wonderful career, and I'm happy to say that I actually came from Seekonk Speedway, and Mrs. Vendetti's here today. I ran there for 25 years every Saturday night. I'm happy that my family stuck behind me, let me do what I wanted to do. I enjoyed that very much, and they all went with me. And hey, here I am today, and I was very fortunate to be able to say I wanted to retire from racing, and I told Ed Barry, I said, the end of the year, I'm going to hang it up. I'm going on 49, 50 years old, and I just feel like I've had enough. And I've had 31 years of great memories, so I'm going to hang it up. So we went to Maine, to Oxford Plains, and which a track I enjoyed going to very much. And we went up there, and it was a 100-lap feature, and damn if we didn't win it. And I said to my wife coming home, I said, boy, would that be nice to be able to say that I won my last race. But I said, I promised Art Barry I'd drive the Thompson, the World Series at Thompson, Connecticut. So I said, I got to do it. So I went down there that day, and my son Ricky was racing, and he said, boy, Dad, I'm going to try to win today because I have the feeling you're going to win. I said, boy, that would be nice. So he went out in his race, and he ended up finishing second. It was one of the toughest races that I ever went into. People were coming over and taking pictures and talking to me. And Art said, come on, George, don't forget now, you got a damn race to run. I said, once I get in that car, Art, I said, I'll be fine. But I said, it's really a sentimental day. Well, I get in that car, and I was pumped up like a 16-year-old. I wanted to win so bad. And damned if I didn't win it. Well, I got out of that car, and I cried like a little kid. It was the nicest feeling. It really was. And, you know, and then after they had a banquet for me, Ronnie had a fan club, they had a banquet for me, and damn it, 400 people didn't come to that banquet. I said, I can't imagine why they all want to come to a banquet. The people from my hometown, they all end up going down there by the busloads. And 17 years later, I get and put into the Hall of Fame, and they're down here by the busloads again. So they're all my friends and fans. But I'll tell you, after being out of racing for 17 years, you know, you think it's all over with and all gone by, and then something like this shows up and you say, isn't that really great? You don't know how proud a person like myself can be up here to think 17 years later, you haven't been forgotten. And it's an awful nice feeling. I want to thank everybody for coming.
This is the most important part. This is the most important part. Hanging your plaque for the people who set years to come. Hopefully 100 years from now, they'll be looking at reading about and thinking about your turnaround from my pleasure. Give you the plaque for yourself. Here's your own special program, number 1 for the kids, and I'm sure. T-shirt, and their own Hall of Fame jacket. We'll be wearing them. Right? Thank you very much. What a pleasure. I call it. No, we're just going to make sure everybody...
We're going to ask all of the inductees to remain for photographs. I want to ask all of you, before you leave this afternoon, take a look at the models here on the table and get a good look at these plaques and the wonderful men that are enshrined in this Hall of Fame. The Near Hall of Fame is a traveling exhibit. It'll be visiting speedways, members of Nears who work so hard to keep these memories alive. Please fill out the sheet for a free issue of Dick Bergman Speedway Illustrated. Please pick up your Near cap or T-shirt. Help support Near in that fashion. Renew your subscription to Speedway Scene and to Trackside, and support your local racetrack, whether it's Seekonk or Monadnock or Waterford or any of the other great racetracks. They need folks through that gate to keep this sport going. And we hope you'll do that and bring somebody new to the races sometime this year, just somebody from the neighborhood, somebody from your family who's never been. Bring them to the races and tell them everything that's going on, and then tell them how great it used to be. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you very much. We'd like to have the 10 inductees or the recipients come forward with group pictures.